Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to Creation in Crisis. This is a monthly webinar from the Creation Spirituality Communities where we're exploring the nexus between spirituality, cosmology, and activism. So the three vocations of creation spirituality, of creativity, of mysticism, and of transformation are what we're about, and seeing if we can follow, which is now a fast changing environment about news and information and actions that for the climate and for our beautiful planet. So that's what we're about. And today we're just so pleased to have Drew Dellinger with us. Extremely pleased to have him. And we will visit him in a second, well, a minute or two. But now I'd like to say there's Bob Eisenberger, who is here. He does our tech, and Penny Andrews. And she and I kind of guide this ship through the months. So Penny asked me to do an introduction that was based on some of the work that I've done on sound. So I'm going to do a little bit of a meditation, and I hope you join me. You can stay seated where you are, and just take your awareness to your body, to your toes, to your bones, to all the parts of your body. And notice their different sizes. And notice how they're made of different materials. And each of those materials are, of course, made of elements and atoms and are vibrating. Though not at decibels you can hear, you are vibrating. You are, in fact, a symphony sitting in your seat. But these atoms and these materials did not always belong to you. They did not always form this body that you're in right now. So I want to take your memory back a little bit and remember 200 years ago where these materials might have been. Go back farther, actually go back to before human beings even walked on the planet. The animals, the rocks, all those materials reformed, taking different shape, simpler shapes. And then the wild time of the lightning and the firestorms at the beginning of the planet, the molten rock there, they were melting and changing and mixing. And back again, now you are a particle and you go close to the sun. The planet isn't made anymore. You go close to the sun, but not in it because you are a leftover particle. And so out you go to the sun and then back to our Andromeda, our home star. And then before that, circling around, all the way back, till you're very simple, just hydrogen and helium, and you're at the Big Bang. And that Big Bang, as you know, has a sound to it. The beginning of the universe had a sound to it. And the sound was one sound at the start. And then that sound moved forward and moved into more sounds as the elements began to find each other and create matter. And then matter found each other, and that created more matter. And we go forward in time. And I'll let you just think about that for a while. Because all around you is a symphony of all the matter and the material coming together and making new sounds. And now we come to 2,500 years ago with Pythagoras, who studied sound and found within sound all the sacred geometry of the universe. Fractals are in there, the golden mean. All of that is in one pitch, one sound. This is a sound that when it first divides to make it richer, goes into something called a fifth, which is the golden mean. This is a sound that is the basis for all spiritual singing around the world. It's in the Shruti box, it's in Gregorian chant, because it fits into the structure of the universe. So I'm going to invite you to make a sound. You can put yourself on mute if you want to. It doesn't work very well to make it together. And see if we can make a sound together. Your own sound within this whole singing cosmos. And for meditators, it goes like this. So I ask now if Bob will put on the video to imagine yourself and remember yourself as being part of the entire universe, your materials in you, part of the whole, and part of this beautiful planet, with a meditation that starts with that very interval that I just sang, that is the basis of all sound.
Apologies.
It's okay, we don't have to do it. It's it was a different video, so I don't know how they got mixed up there. There we go. Drew Dellinger is important enough to us that both Penny and I wanted to say a few words before he began speaking. I first heard Drew at El Silomar, which is a retreat center on the California coast during one of Matthew Fox's cosmic masses. He was the young poet, and he was had an amazing, breathtaking rhymes and concepts that he offered in his poems. And so several times, other times, I heard him do his poems, but fortunately, he also recorded them. So we have used them in my Creation Spirituality Worship Service in Pittsburgh that for our community and to ground ourselves in these truths that he lifts up so artfully. So I have to say my biggest relationship with Drew is to listen to those poems. They're like music to me. The sounds and the presentation come across as if he was singing a song. And so I am very pleased to have him here and to experience once again the clarity of his mind and his passion for justice and for the transformation of our culture into a healthier culture. Penny?
Thanks, Gail. Drew has been a core developer of the Awakening the Dreamer from Pachamama. He's been called a national trailblazer, Deep and Courageous by Alice Walker, and one of the most courageous, creative, and prophetic voices of his generation by Cornel West. His bringing together cosmology and social justice is an integration that I'm sure he'll touch on many times today, but it's innovative and it rings so deeply true. So with great pleasure, I introduce Drew.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Penny and Gail, for your welcome and for your kind words and for hosting me. It's so great to be together in a creation spirituality community. You know, I owe so much to the writing and teaching and the mentorship of Matthew Fox. You know, he's one of the most important mentors in my life. Yeah, I've been blessed with many mentors and colleagues and teachers, from Joanna Macy to Charlene Spretnak to, but you know, Matthew Fox, Brian Swim, and Thomas Berry are definitely the most important mentors and really kind of role models for a life of engagement and learning and teaching, and that combines cosmology with ecology, with issues of justice, with issues of art and creativity. And that's one of the things I value so much about Matt Fox, is the way, you know, Swim and Barry are just fantastic and brilliant, and their focus is on cosmology and the new story and the universe story and the earth community. And one thing I always appreciated about Matt Fox is just how Catholic his mind is in the sense of universal, and not in the sense of the Catholic tradition. He's talking about art, he's talking about liberation theology, he's talking about justice making, he's talking about art as meditation. He's bringing forward these creation centered mystics, these women mystics in particular, and he's connecting with Howard Thurman. And he just has a prodigious curiosity and connection making capacity. And I think the work that he's brought forward, the work that all of you are involved in, is tremendously important in our time. So let me say a word. I actually have let me check my notes here, because I have some definitions of cosmology, and I think it would be nice to bring forward one from Matt Fox here. Sorry, I've got paper management issues. Let me find what did I do with my, sorry. Anyway, somehow I'm not seeing the paper I was looking for. Anyway, maybe I can find it in a second, but let me start with a little short poem, and then I'll talk a little bit about my main kind of thread that I want to bring forward, which is a pretty broad thread. It's and I'm sure it's familiar to many of you in spirit, which is connecting ecology, social justice, and cosmology. And that's kind of my mission statement, if you will, is that we need to build movements. We need to strengthen and build movements that connect ecology, social justice, and cosmology or worldview. And we need to build those movements using the power of dream, the power of story, the power of art, and the power of action. So we need to strengthen and build movements that connect ecology, social justice, and cosmology using the powers of dream, story, art, and action. Let me just read a quick poem to kind of touch on some of these in some poetic language. This is my little book here, Love Letter to the Milky Way. Whoops. This poem is called Revision. Open your eyes. See visions. Imagine a melody infinitely. Listen. A planet of stories with islands of silence. A planet of stories with islands of silence. Her curved surface radiates grace. Milky Way blazing in the sky above the city. Speaking in fractals, the stars are telepathic. Wake the poets. Wake the dreamers. Cultivate the tendrils in the vineyard of your heart. Reorient our buildings to the solstice, and from the center of the city, see the stars. So when I think of cosmology, I'm sorry, I'm just annoyed when I can't find the papers. I found the paper. Okay, this is the one. So there's so many different, I'm kind of collecting definitions of cosmology, right? So I have, like 15, in a little folder somewhere. But because I like to get a lot of different angles, obviously this is not news to anybody on this call, but just I like to, many of you are presenters and teachers as well. So, as you probably know, cosmology is not a super familiar term to most people in the mainstream. So when I'm presenting, I'll it's often to people like yourselves who know this work and know the concept of cosmology, but I'll often say, some of you may be familiar with cosmology, some of you not so much. So let's just kind of define it and get everybody on the same page. So I would say things like cosmology is, most simply the study of the universe, right? Cosmology, study of the cosmos. But it's also the story that a culture tells itself about how the world came to be and how we fit into it. So the kind of simplest definition, the study of the cosmos, the study of the large scale structure of the universe and its origin and development, the development of the galaxies. That's, kind of what we think of in the modern sense, the modern scientific sense as astronomy, astrophysics, this type of thing. But the broader definition you would encounter more in like anthropology or philosophy or religious studies, the story that a culture tells itself about how the world came to be and how we fit into it. So here's and Thomas Berry, many of you I'm sure are very familiar with Thomas Berry's work. Some of you may be less familiar, but Thomas Berry's single-minded focus was cosmology. I mean, this was the great, if you had to summarize what Thomas Berry was bringing forward in one concept, it would be he was focused on cosmology. What is the worldview? What is the story? What is the narrative? What is the paradigm? What is the cosmovision? What is the cosmology that's in back of, which is a phrase Thomas Berry used to use. It's kind of an old school phrase, but Thomas used to say, what is the worldview in back of the ecological destruction? What are the deep roots of the ecological crisis? And this, of course, brings us to an idea that we're in a deep crisis. I mean, this is what the term deep ecology is all about. There's shallow ecology and there's deep ecology. There's a shallow crisis potentially, or there's a deep crisis. And we're in a deep crisis. If it was a shallow crisis, we would say, well, maybe it was just kind of logistical mix up and we just didn't really think about where our, all these chemical wastes were going to go. And okay, now, but we'll develop a better system for the chemical waste. We'll develop a better storage capacities for our spent nuclear fuel rods. We'll, come up with a better program of recycling. And then, yeah, if it's a shallow crisis, then a shallow solution would work. If it's a deep crisis, you're going to need a deep solution, right? And so this is what Thomas Berry was pointing toward. He would say, he would often talk about cosmology as being even deeper than religion. That your religion, which we think of as so fundamental, grows out of your cosmology, your basic sense of how the universe came to be and how we as humans fit into it. But at one point, I remember he was talking about the kind of deep religious, philosophical roots of the Earth crisis. And he was so focused on trying to understand why the modern Western industrial context had been the originator of this destruction of the biosphere. And he said one time, he said to me, he said, and he called this a pathology, that there was a deep pathology that drove modern Western industrialized culture toward destruction of the earth, towards the destruction, the devastation of the only context in which human life and life on earth can continue to flourish, which is namely the planet Earth, the Earth community. And I remember he said one day, he said, the pathology is so deep, it can have no origin other than a religious origin. The pathology is so deep, it can have no origin other than a religious origin. So this was Thomas Berry's focus. What are the deep philosophical, religious worldview dimensions in back of the ecological crisis? Let me, here's this great quote. Matt Fox obviously has great writing on cosmology. And here's a quote from Coming of the Cosmic Christ. Fox writes, by the term cosmology, I mean three things: a scientific story about the origins of our universe, mysticism, that is a psychic response to our being in the universe, and art, which translates science and mysticism into images that awaken body, soul, and society. A cosmology is all three elements. A cosmology needs all three elements to come alive. It is our joyful response, mysticism, to the awesome fact of our being in the universe, science, and our expression of that response by the art of our lives and citizenship, art. Elsewhere, Matt Fox has said a similar thing, saying, cosmology is science, mysticism, and art creating together a vision for existence, right? So this was the kind of thing that attracted me to thinkers like Matthew Fox, like Miriam McGillis, like Joanna Macy, like Thomas Berry, like Charlene Spratnak, like Brian Swimp, that they were speaking to some of the deepest visions and deepest crises and deepest possibilities of our time. And it's a transitional time. It's a time of crisis. It's a second axial period. It's it's a time when a lot of cycles seem to be ending, new cycles beginning. So it's a potent time. So part of what I've been interested in, and I was very blessed to, I'll just briefly say, since the question came up, I was raised in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. My parents were really awesome, Ann and Walter Dellinger, shout out to them. They were both had a deep understanding of civil rights and social justice and racial justice and feminism and things like this. So I was kind of raised around a kind of progressive politics, but not so much, the deep interest in kind of like world religions and spiritual topics was something I more developed on my own. I also, was growing up in North Carolina in this, a child of the 70s, a teen of the 80s. And, environmental issues were not really on my radar until, I got to be about 20 or so. And so, but I felt kind of ill at ease in terms of I wasn't really thrilled with the kind of superficiality of our culture, the lingering injustices and the kind of acceptance of economic injustice and social and racial and gender injustice and war and brutality and abuse and just how much violence there is and the kind of superficiality of consumerism and the kind of capitalist milieu. And so encountering Thomas Berry was absolutely thrilling, and I was starting college at the same time that I was reading Brian Swim's The Universe is a Green Dragon, or Thomas Berry's The Dream of the Earth. And Berry is saying things like, he's got a great essay in there called The American College in the Ecological Age. And I was, starting college, and he's writing things like college in this, college students in this late 20th century need to be involved in the significant historical as well as a significant personal process. Neither of these can function effectively without the other. The college student needs to feel that they are participating in one of the most significant ventures ever to take place in the entire history of the cosmos. And, and this was just exciting to me. Somebody's talking about real stuff, and like Gail was talking about, we are each a symphony connected to the great symphony that is the unfolding universe itself. And so Berry is saying a similar thing, that we have a personal process. How do we unfold our vision for our lives, our vocation? How do we develop and express our talents and our passions and our interests and our care for the communities that we're a part of? But there's also that's our personal process, right? But there's also a historical process. And this is what Thomas Berry is talking about with his concept of the great work, that there is oftentimes in a historical period, in a cultural context, an overarching task, a historical mission for a certain place and a certain time. And as Berry saw it, our historical task is creating a mutually enhancing human-earth relationship, of stopping this industrialized, corporatized assault on the planet, where we've overrun any checks on our expansion through our transcendent technology. And we're devastating this, 13.8 billion year process that's unfolding here, continuing to unfold for the last 4.5 billion years on planet Earth. And we're heedlessly, recklessly driven by greed and, a lack of seeing and sensing our participation and our impact on this great community of life. You get the gist. You all know what I'm talking about. And so Berry, Berry has this great sentence where he says, the historical mission of our times. I'll paraphrase it and edit it a little bit, but he says in essence, the historical mission of our times is to reinvent the human at the species level by means of story and shared dream experience. So Thomas Berry is offering us a chance to step out of the water that we've been swimming in. Notice that we're inhabiting and acting out and being pushed around by a worldview that is centuries and even millennia old, that has had these strands. And, and it's hard to summarize an entire worldview. There's many different facets of it, and we all inhabit it in different ways. And we all have our own kind of cosmologies swirling around and competing and coalescing, in our own minds. But in general, the Western worldview, the Western religious vision has been one predominantly of separation of humans in the earth from the earth. Thomas Berry used this term radical discontinuity. The Western thinking and religion, spirituality, philosophy has perceived and perpetuated a radical discontinuity between the human and the natural world. And that this was this, as Charlene Spretnak once put it to me, she said, this is just like a bizarre turn that Western culture took. No other culture in the entire history of the planet that taught its children that nature was dead, that nature was unintelligent, that nature was inert, that humans were separate from nature, that humans walked around on top of nature. No, every other culture And the entire history of the planet taught that nature was alive, that nature was wise, that nature was ensouled, that nature was full of spirit as well as matter, that nature was, that we were embedded and emerged from and are intimately a part of nature, that we are one with Pachamama, we are one with the universe process. And so that's kind of the good news and the bad news. I mean, the bad news is that this culture that took this bizarre left turn, that taught that nature was intelligent, that it was unintelligent, that nature was dead, that we were separate from nature. The bad news is that that became the globally dominant culture in a globalized, corporate capitalist, global economic system. But the good news is that if modern Western industrialized culture is the only culture that took that turn, the good news is there's so many other resources and so many other models for being human, and so many other cosmologies and worldviews that we can draw upon. And so we're seeing that. We're seeing the reemergence of an understanding amongst many in the modern industrialized Western context of the absolute salience of indigenous worldviews. I mean, I was just watching a video of a young woman from the Amazon yesterday speaking at the climate conference in Glasgow, and she was saying, I wrote it down, it was so beautiful, but she was saying, my name is Chi Suri, I think she said, and my father was the great chief, and I'm only 26 years old, but I'm from the Amazon, where my people have been living for the last 6,000 years. And my father was the great chief, and she said his name, and she said, my father always taught me that we must listen to the stars and the moon and the wind and the rivers and the trees. You see, that's a different way of knowing. That's a different worldview. That's a different cosmology. And that leads to a different politics, that leads to a different set of practices, that leads to a call for different policies than would make sense to a westernized, industrialized, capitalist, corporatist context, where the maximization of wealth and profit, regardless of the impact on human communities, regardless of the immense social and economic injustices, regardless of the closing down of the future of the biosphere. I mean, can there be a more basic ethical principle than you can't ruin the planet for future generations? That seems pretty basic. It seems pretty basic. And it reminds me of another quote that I was looking at from another indigenous Amazon activist who said, we believe that rivers are alive and sing. This is our politics. To us, rivers are alive and sing. This is our politics. So this is the kind of power of cosmology. It can seem very, a little, oh, well, analyzing worldviews, it's like this gets down to how we treat each other, how we think about ourselves, how we institute economic, political, social systems, and how we define what it means to be a human being, and how we situate our personal process within a larger historical process. Remember the quote? He said, the college student needs to be involved in a significant personal as well as a significant historical process. Neither of these can function without the other. So take away the idea that Barry was talking about college students in that moment. That's what he's calling for each of us. That's what he means when he talks about the great work. He's saying that we need to think about how is our personal process, our personal work, connected to the most significant work that we can be doing on the planet. And that's something we all have to think about and decide for ourselves. But in Barry's vision, it's clearly related about ceasing the industrialized modern assault on the biosphere and instituting an era of mutually enhancing human-earth relationships. And so, all right, let me take a breath and think for a second, then I'll talk a little bit more specifically about connecting ecology and social justice. Okay. So having studied, very intensely with Thomas Berry and having him as a mentor for the last 19, 20 years of his life, and then also having a deep interest in racial justice and the civil rights movement. And I began to think about what I wanted to do for my doctoral dissertation, and so starting in the early 2000s, going, okay, is there a way to link social justice with ecology? I mean, to me, the links are fairly obvious. I mean, they're almost so obvious that it's like, I don't even want to say them because they're so obvious. But it's also, it's like anything that goes without saying should probably be said. A professor once said to me. So how do we articulate these deep connections that are obvious to many of us, and I'm sure to many on this call, between ecology and social justice? I mean, I'll give you an example. Like one time I was reading, so I started really delving into the speeches, sermons, and writings of Martin Luther King Jr. And I was reading, and he said at one point, a nation that will hold people in slavery for 244 years will thingify them. We'll treat them as things. We'll treat people as things. And it reminded me instantly of being with Thomas Berry in Greensboro, North Carolina, and sitting in his apartment, just the two of us. And he said to me at one point, he said, people say that you shouldn't treat a person as a thing. And that's a good saying in a certain sense, but you shouldn't even treat a thing as a thing, because there's no such thing as a thing. And I said, this is very interesting, because Berry, we think of ecological, environmental, cosmological thinker. King, we think of as human rights, civil rights, social justice, racial justice. And here they are both articulating a similar principle of treating sacred realities, treating humans, treating beings, treating ecosystems, treating the planet as if they were things to be exploited rather than subjects to be communed with, which of course is one of Thomas Berry's most memorable sayings, that the universe is composed of subjects to be communed with, not objects to be exploited, or the universe is a communion of subjects, not a collection of objects. And so talking about thingification, talking about objectification, talking about the denial of personhood. This is kind of basic reverence and respect, right? I mean, this is what I mean by these things are so basic that it's almost like painful to have to say it out loud. But yes, reverence and respect and reciprocity are important. This is lessons we may need to relearn from indigenous worldviews, but having or revisit the ethical teachings of our religions and our philosophies that we seem willing to push to the side as we participate and allow mendacious and greedy elites to steer our economies toward immense exploitation and oppression and suffering and inequality and injustice. So they're articulating this principle of reverence, of respect, of personhood. So I would say that personhood, and Matt Fox does a great job of talking about this, because he even uses the term like cosmic personhood, right? It's not just about human people, but it's also about the fish people and the bird people and the tree people and the ecosystem people, and this is what Thomas Berry is getting at. So personhood, reverence, respect is a deep principle that connects ecology and social justice. Another concept is community. I think a lot of what Thomas Berry is talking about is community. We are part of the Earth community, that humans in the natural world will go into the future as a single sacred community, or we will both perish in the desert along the way, right? And Martin Luther King is constantly reflecting on community. He speaks about the beloved community often. And so community is another deep, and there's a relationship between personhood and community, in the sense that the people that we feel that we're in community with are the people that we feel are real persons, right? And the people that we give that sense of community to are people that we acknowledge as full human beings, or full, cosmic persons in the sense of the animals or the species or the ecosystems, right? A third, so personhood connects ecology, social justice, and cosmology. The idea of community and the experience and the practice of community connects ecology, social justice, and cosmology. Interconnectedness, interdependence, oneness, interrelatedness. This is also a principle that connects ecology, social justice, and cosmology. And so, Barry's work is just full of, and Swim and Fox and all the rest, this sense of that the universe is a single process. It's a single energy that's unfolding. It's seamless. There's not like some set break, like, oh, here's chapter 1 is this, and then chapter 2 is the galaxies, and then chapter 5 is the humans. It's one process that's seamless. It's a single energetic unfolding, and therefore we are all of it. We are the galaxies on a Zoom call right now. The Milky Way galaxy gets on Zoom calls because that's what it's doing right now. The Milky Way galaxy writes poetry in the hearts of poets. The Milky Way galaxy is the greatest electrical guitarist we've ever known in the form of Jimi Hendrix. The Milky Way galaxy is one of the most powerful arts activists of the 20th century in the form of Nina Simone. The earth flies with the birds. The earth creates oxygen through the phytoplankton. The cosmos itself falls in love and swims and quivers in the breeze when aspen leaves do. So all of this is one single energy unfolding. And Martin King's work is absolutely filled with this sensibility. He says the universe is indeed a unity, a oneness. He says that I can't be who I'm meant to be unless you are who you're meant to be, and you can't be who you're meant to be unless I am who I'm meant to be. We are all involved in a single process. We are a chain. We are linked together. So the spirit, of what we would call Ubuntu, this African wisdom teaching that I am because you are, Martin Luther King is expressing the same type of ideas. I mean, he has a sermon called All That We Are, We Owe. All that we are, we owe. It's the same idea as that I am because you are, and we are because everything is. And so Martin Luther King is saying things like, I've got one precise example. I can do them off the top of my head, but again, here's just one example. I could give you 15 examples that sound very similar, but here's one example from August 8th, 1965, from a sermon called The Man Who Was a Fool. And Martin Luther King says, all of this boils down to the fact that all life is interrelated. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. For some strange reason, I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be, and you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality. John Donne caught it years ago and placed it in graphic terms. No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. And then he goes on toward the end to say, any man's death diminishes me because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never sin to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. And, and one of the reasons why King is talking is the sermon is called The Man Who Was a Fool, is because this man failed to recognize his interrelationship, his interrelatedness with all people. And with all life. And so this is part of, I'll save you much more quotations, but it was through kind of a 15, 20-year process of really delving into Martin Luther King's speeches, sermons, and writings that I began to move inevitably to what may sound to some like a pretty bold claim, which is that we can see Martin Luther King as an ecological thinker. That we can see him as someone who's deeply interested in cosmology. He's theological, of course, no denying that. He's, prophetic Christian. He's deeply rooted in his African-American prophetic Christian tradition, deeply rooted in the Black radical tradition, deeply rooted in the Black social gospel, deeply rooted in kind of a tradition of what we could call the Black Ghandians, that would include people like Benjamin Mays and Howard Thurman and Mordecai Johnson. But his theology has been well covered. There's well over 1,000 books on Martin Luther King. But a part that's been missed to a large extent. A few people have touched on it, but nobody's delved into it with the thoroughness that I've attempted to. The part that's been missed is this cosmological side. When you're talking about the interrelated structure of reality, you're speaking cosmologically, you're speaking ecologically. And so without denying any of his theological groundedness and his deeply God-centered tradition, I think there is a message that's been underappreciated in terms of cosmology, systems thinking, interrelatedness, and interdependence. And that's why I am positing this argument that we can see King as ecological, cosmological systems thinker, for whom interdependence was not a minor thing that he mentioned once or twice. It was a consistent, overwhelmingly consistent aspect of his rhetoric. And he's deeply interested in the cosmos and the actual physical structures of the universe. I don't want to go on too long, so I'm going to try to wrap up in the next couple of minutes here and move to some questions and discussion. But let me just piece together a few final thoughts. When I say that King is, when I say that King is an ecological thinker, he definitely makes a small handful of what I would call directly environmentalist statements. For instance, he says the cities are gasping in polluted air and enduring contaminated water. That you don't get much more environmental justice oriented than that. That's from his 1968 publication, Trumpet of Conscience. Our cities are gasping in polluted air and enduring contaminated water. He also says things like he's very interested in the nuclear issue, what would have been called the atomic issue, and then the nuclear issue, is starting in the late 50s. Certainly by 1960, he's concerned, he's involved in supporting these groups that are calling for a freeze on nuclear testing. He says he's concerned about levels of radiation in the atmosphere. Some of you may remember, that they were finding, these radioactive isotopes, like, called strontium-90 in, like women's breast milk, in like bones of children. They were doing all this testing in the Nevada desert, and this radioactivity was getting everywhere. One point, King says, it's nice to drink milk at an unsegregated lunch counter, but not when there's strontium-90 in it. He said one cannot be concerned just with civil rights. It's nice to drink milk at an unsegregated lunch counter, but not when there's strontium-90 in it. He said it would be foolhardy for me to work for integrated schools or integrated lunch counters and not be concerned about the survival of the world in which to be integrated. So I think one of the reasons why this has been missed is because he was speaking within the context of nuclear and war and the atomic issue. But those are that's an environmental ethos. There's no question. If you're concerned about toxins in your milk, if you're concerned about toxins in the atmosphere. And so he specifically mentioned the atmosphere. So these are he's articulating environmental issues in the 50s and 60s. And he's saying, he was so concerned about this nuclear war and nuclear testing that he makes direct statements about the levels of radiation in the atmosphere. I mean, what's the big issue now? Levels of carbon in the atmosphere. He's talking about what's the big issue now? We're cooking the planet through global warming and climate chaos and climate catastrophe. And King is, often saying in the context of like a nuclear conflagration, he could say, we might turn this earth into an inferno that only the mind of Dante could not even imagine. So if you're concerned about toxins in milk, if you're concerned about toxins in the atmosphere, and you're concerned about the survival of the world, then you're involved in ecological and environmental thinking. He's also, of course, deeply ecological in his focus on interrelatedness and interdependence. And if you don't take my word for it. Here's a quote from a guy named Robert Deitch, who wrote an essay called The Ecological Conscience in 1970. So right as the ecological issue is exploding all over the country and around the world, Robert Deitch writes, "The vital spirit of ecology, in fact, is contained within the awareness of the interrelatedness of all things." He's saying, if you're involved in the awareness of the interrelatedness of all things, that's the vital spirit of ecology. And King is constantly saying all life is interrelated. I've found at least 17 or 18 examples of King saying some version of all I'm saying, my friends, is this, that all life is interrelated. All I'm saying this morning is this, that all life is interrelated. It really boils down to this, that all life is interrelated. It's one of the central themes of King's rhetoric. Okay, so let me wrap up, and I'll just say, by way of closing, Thomas Berry had this really powerful sentence. I mean, he had so many, but one that I think of often. He said it several different ways. So I'll give you a couple of different ways he said it, but he basically would say, ecology is functional cosmology. Or he would say, ecology is a functioning cosmology, or ecology is functioning cosmology. And so part of what that means to me is what Thomas Berry is saying is that when your cosmology is functioning, when your worldview is functioning, what's the test of that? You can where does the rubber meet the road? How is your worldview supporting your society, your culture, your life? Well, are you destroying the non-renewable or only partially renewable resources that you depend on for life? Are you destroying the only known garden? Are you destroying the garden plan of the known universe? Do you have immense social inequities and discrimination and violence and conflict? These are some indications that your worldview is dysfunctional. But if your cosmology is functioning, then you would have ecology. So ecology, if you have ecology, it's an indication that your worldview is functioning. If you have sustainability, if you have, so permaculture and bioregionalism and, not causing an unnecessary mass extinction, these are things that are not ecology. And if you don't have those, you probably have a dysfunctional cosmology. Ecology is functioning cosmology. When your cosmology is functioning, the sign of that, or the end result of that, is ecology. Well, I would also say that social justice is functioning cosmology. Economic justice is functioning cosmology. If you don't have social justice, racial justice, gender justice, economic justice, then that's a pretty clear indication that your worldview, your narrative, your story, your cosmology needs a tune-up. So I think that's the kind of concept that Thomas Berry is putting forward, that ecology is functioning cosmology, can be broadened and to understand that ecology is functioning cosmology, but social justice is functioning cosmology. Economic justice is functioning cosmology. So I think we are called by these great we are called by these great teachers like Thomas Berry,
Period.
Martin Luther King, like the great feminist leaders and womanist leaders of our time and the times before us. We are called by the indigenous leaders of the climate movement to create a functioning cosmology that would result in ecology and social justice and just a beautiful, joyful, communion-based experience of community and human possibility on this planet. So it's a thrill and an honor to join with all of you in the work that you're doing as we move toward this vision.
Wow, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a quote from Thomas Berry. It's not easy to describe what cosmology is. It's neither religion nor is it science. It's a mode of knowing. And one thing that struck me consistently, because I think you're the first person that I've known who grew into adulthood holding Thomas Berry's vision. You know, a lot of it came backwards and moved forward. How did that come about? How did you end up in his apartment learning from him?
Well, I was a bit of a rebellious teen, and I also had like undiagnosed ADHD issues, and so like I didn't, I had a conflicted relationship with high school, and compulsory schooling, and but I was always really interested, kind of one of those seeker types, and so I would go to the library. I grew up right next to the Chapel Hill Public Library, and I would go and I would find these books on the shelves. Like I remember getting into Carlos Castaneda and reading all of Carlos Castaneda's books. And I remember, but like a pivotal moment, and I remember a pivotal moment was, right around 1989, watching Bill Moyers and Joseph Campbell on the TV talking about the power of myth. And I was like, wow, this is actually the kind of thing I want to learn more about. I didn't really know at that point that, nobody told me that you could study comparative mythology. This was just something that was kind of a new idea. Anyway, around this time, my friend Steve Snyder, I was kind of bringing him along too, and like showing him these books by Thomas Berry. I mean, not Thomas Berry, by like Joseph Campbell and Carlos Castaneda. And I remember I showed him this video about Nostradamus called Nostradamus, the Man Who Saw Tomorrow. Anyway, so me and my friend Steve Snyder in high school were just kind of nerding out and trying to learn more about kind of spiritual, philosophical topics. And Steve encountered this book called The Universe is a Green Dragon by Brian Swim. And it was dedicated to Thomas Berry, and we didn't even know who that was, but he's reading me these quotes, and it's kind of mind blowing. And then later, fast forward like a year, and Steve Snyder and I are both at Prescott College, and we were visiting Boulder, Colorado. We went in a bookstore and we saw The Dream of the Earth by Thomas Berry. And, we got the book, and we would read each other passages from it. And that was just mind blowing. I mean, that was the big, we had been seeking around and fooling around and Joseph Campbell and Carlos Castaneda and reading the Seth material and watching videos about Nostradamus and going to the harmonic convergence and like chanting as the sun came up, but when we found Thomas Berry, we're like, boom, this dude is breaking it down, and I've never heard of anybody talking about the comprehensive context of the story of the universe in a way that's both sacred and scientific at the same time. So this like definitely like long, we're like, oh, wow, this is heavy, and then pretty quick, then we're reading Matthew Fox, and then we're listening to The Fate of the Earth by Miriam McGillis, and just going like, whoa, this is kind of the kind of thing that's really energizing to us. And we had an opportunity. We went to a conference in 1990 called the Earth and Spirit Conference in Seattle, Washington. And I heard Joanna Macy speak, and Brian Swim speak, and Miriam McGillis and Thomas Berry all speak for the first time. And we went up and talked to Thomas Berry and said, we'd love for you to come to Prescott College at some point. Anyway, Thomas Berry gave a great talk on the opening night of the conference. And then this guy, Daniel Goleman, got up, and Daniel Goleman said, and this was the opening evening, and Joanna Macy had given a really hard opening speech, and Daniel Goleman got up and he said, I've been thinking if they were to make a movie of the new cosmology, that that Joanna Macy would be played by Katharine Hepburn, and Brian Swim would be played by Steve Martin, and Thomas Berry would be played by Yoda. Which is pretty funny. But anyway, then we had a chance to study with Thomas Berry through a study abroad program that was set up by Dr. Elizabeth Ferrero, who was teaching New Cosmology and Thomas Berry's work in Miami, Florida, at a Catholic school called St. Thomas University. So she's from Italy originally, and she set up these study abroad programs in the summers of 91 and 92 and 93. And so that's when I really got to connect with Thomas Berry in a really deep way, the first summer of 91 in Assisi. And then brought Thomas Berry to Prescott College in the winter of 1992. and studied with him again in the summers of 92 and 93, et cetera, et cetera. So that was kind of the beginning of and Thomas Berry is so gracious that he just kind of enabled me and Steve to enlist him as a mentor, for the next 20 years, from 1990 to his passing in 2009. But I was immediately taken by the power of his vision and his work, and that of these other people I've mentioned. And so Steve and I created a course at Prescott College, and we made a videotape called Earth Education, a celebration of the cosmos, that had Barry's speeches when he came to Prescott College. And Matt Fox published our curriculum for the course that we had created, which originally was called New Cosmology, and then we called it New Cosmology: The Universe Story. And Matt Fox printed up the curriculum in his Creation Spirituality magazine, and and got to know Brian and Matt, and just kind of continued on from there. But we were very, committed to like sharing this vision through curricula, through videotapes, through, we started a rap band in college, and we recorded a song called the Universe Jam, that started like the first verse of the universe pours forth like a sea of mystery out of the void, unmanifest silence, space-time comes into existence, unseen shaping, swirling, unfurling, hydrogen, helium, divine is revealed within galactic whirlpools as energy flows in, a star collapses, supernova explosion, this type of thing. So that's kind of how I evolved into a spoken word poet, and I created a slideshow to tell the story of the universe, because this is the Universe Story book was just out, and I was like, people need to see the images. People don't really get what's a galaxy and what's a nebula and what's a star cluster and what's a solar system. I said, people need to see we have photographs of galaxies. People need to see these. And so I created a 75 slide presentation that I would do in 20 to 30 minutes, where I would kind of go over the story of the universe and include some of the little rap bits and talk about the ecological crisis and moving into action and activism toward the end. That later became, this film called The Awakening Universe that was part of the Pachamama Alliance symposium that I helped them design. But anyway, that gives you a little bit of the trajectory of how I got into it.
We have a question.
You've frozen. Okay, go ahead.
I watched
We got you
films
now.
on. Oh, sorry.
You froze, but you're unfrozen.
Okay, I watch films on nature sometimes, and sometimes nature seems cruel and violent, killing and eating each other. Life feeds life. How does the human behave appropriately within that design?
It's a great question. I mean, there's certainly, something that Brian Swim and Thomas Berry address, which is that there is a violent aspect to the cosmic process. I mean, there is destruction, if you will, but it's almost always in service of a larger arc of creativity. And so the universe is creative. I mean, there's certainly destruction and dissolution, but the larger arc of its creativity is immense, and that's obvious because it started as hydrogen, and now we have, a rainforest ecosystem with, millions and millions of species. And so it's all developed in the direction of, and so this is very kind of Teilhardian, and Berry picking up this Teilhardian sense of complexification. And but I think how does the human behave appropriately within this design? That's the question. And and I would think some of the indications that we have, or wisdom that we have, is again from kind of indigenous traditions. Well, how do we behave within a context of life feeding life? With reverence, with respect, with sensitivity, and so you have the immense seriousness within which hunting and fishing, is treated in the indigenous worldview. The prayers, the sense of reciprocity, so we have disconnected ourselves to a large extent. Reciprocity is the overarching ethical command or context, of indigenous life. that you don't just take and take and take and take and take without some sense of giving back, without some sense of participation, without some sense of reverence, respect, and reciprocity. I mean, I don't know how else to say it than that. So what would that look like on an industrial scale? You know, how do we think of the sacredness of all of our interconnections? You know, how do we think of the future? How do we, you know, we've so unshackled our ethical, you know, any sense of ethical constraint in terms of the maximization of wealth and profit. There's no spiritual, psychic, sacred aspect of the natural world that needs to be revered and held in balance, that we can continue, you know, this kind of fantasy that we can continue to have infinite economic pillaging on a finite planet with immense resilience, but still limited capacities for you know, for regeneration. We can't continue to you know, destroy the topsoil at a rate that's 1,000 times faster than it replenishes. We can't continue to drain the aquifers at a rate that's 1,000 times faster than they replenish. We cannot have another 50 years like the last 50 years. 60% of the wildlife is gone. Since we took the first photographs of Earth from space, or that famous photograph of Earth from space, the Earthrise photograph, 60% of the wildlife is gone since that photograph. 60% of the wildlife is gone since the first Earth Day. 60% of the wildlife is gone since Martin Luther King said, it really boils down to this, that all life is interrelated. So it's the simple fact that we cannot have another 50 years like the last 50 years have been. So I think it, you know, comes back to, again, these things that are so basic, but so hard, seemingly difficult at times to put into practice with the global economy that we have. But it's reverence, respect, humility, and, you know, harmonizing ourselves to the limits of the biosphere.
I think I also read, I see if I got that right, that we have doubled the population on the Earth in the last 50 years, since the 50s. That we are dealing with an enormous amount of people now. So
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's doubled several times. And if you look at the global population before, at the start of the 20th century, it was like 1 billion people, and then it doubled, and then it doubled again, and then it doubled again. Yeah.
and we're living longer, but maybe we need us.
Carol Kilby asks, how do we have a lot coming in. How long does it take historically for knowledge to turn into practice?
That's a good question. And hi, Carol. I've seen some names of people that I recognize, names and faces, Carol and Dominic and Marlene DiNardo. And so it's great to see all of y'all. You know, I think that I don't know is the short answer. I like to be clear about what I know and what I don't know. But I do think that there is precedent for dramatic transformations. I mean, I'll give you an example. I think we could think of lots of examples. I mean, the civil rights movement is, you know, one of my big inspirations, but, you know, it's a, you know, a fundamental transformation of the society that took place in an 11-year period, you know, basically. There's the long civil rights movement, but there's a pretty concentrated period from 1954 to 1965 in which immense changes took place. Obviously still dealing with immense depths of systemic racism and white supremacy, of course, as well, though. But like, for example, I'll give you another example. I mean, I have a professor named David Delancey, and he was an expert in the ancient Mediterranean world and like the mystery cults, you know, like the mystery schools and the cults of Mithras and these cults, the Eleusinian mysteries and these initiations. Anyway, he talks about how quickly Christianity spread around the ancient Mediterranean world. I mean, it was just like wildfire. And David E. Lancey was also very interested in the mass extinction crisis, from a long time ago. And I presume he still runs a website called massextinction.net. And he said, that we should actually look to the model of, how quickly something like Christianity spread across the ancient Mediterranean world, and how we could take hope from the fact that most people, when David E. Lancey was saying this, 15, 20 years ago, he would say most people have no idea about the mass extinction crisis. And that actually should give us, a boost of energy. Because when people find out about the mass extinction crisis, there's potential that, huge changes and transformations could be made relatively quickly. And for this, there is historical precedent, such as the spread of Christianity around the ancient Mediterranean world very quickly. So, yeah, I don't know how helpful that is, but I do think that things can happen very quickly. I do think we are in pivotal moments. I mean, I can get as dispirited. I think we're in real challenges to democracy, and we're seeing, kind of authoritarianist, fascist, resurgences. And I think we really have to focus on democracy in this country and elsewhere. I think, it's very frustrating. I mean, I could just cry tears around every month that's wasted, where major, changes aren't being passed right now in Washington, D.C. And could definitely indulge in some wailing and gnashing of teeth. But I also think that we've seen, 2018, 2019, these are epical shifts in understanding of the urgency of the climate crisis, and the strength of the youth climate movement in particular, but also the global climate movement, the indigenous-led climate movement, the way the youth understand these intersections. I'll give you one example. There's so many youth leaders that we could talk about. There's Greta's on every continent, and but there's one woman named Jamie Margolin who started a group called 0 Hour, or This Is 0 Hour. And 0 Hour was creating this popular education campaign called Get to the Roots. And they were, doing a very good job of articulating things that I've struggled over decades to articulate. And they were saying, we need to understand that the roots of the climate crisis are capitalism, white supremacy, patriarchy, and colonialism. And all of these things are interconnected. And these are the deep roots of the climate crisis. And we have to deal with patriarchy, white supremacy, capitalism, and colonialism. That's what it would mean to get to the roots of the climate crisis. So, I'm incredibly inspired by the depth of understanding and connection making that is pretty much standard for a lot of these new generations of climate activists. So, I can go toward despair. I can go towards, some optimism. As I've said before, I don't think it matters that much whether we have hope or not. I mean, what are we going to do? Are we going to start, attacking each other unless we're convinced that everything's going to work out? So I really believe in Václav Havel's statement, that hope is not the assurance that everything is going to work out, but it's the conviction that certain things make sense no matter how they turn out. So, it makes sense to work for justice, respect, solidarity, human community. It makes sense to work for a planet and a climate that can thrive and that have the miraculous diversity of species that Earth has. It makes sense to work for those, no matter how it turns out. And that's what hope is. Hope is the conviction that something makes sense, not the assurance that it's going to turn out A-okay. So I think we just keep plugging along, obviously having some hope and not being paralyzed with despair, can help us be more efficacious. But I don't think we need to know, even if it doesn't work out, we're still going to need to work for peace and human solidarity and, environmental sustainability as we move into the future, no matter what.
Dominic Flamiano lists a number of those issues that you just named, Drew, and then states, Cosmology is ecology, is social justice. How do we put that into action? Is it even possible? And how does social media impact?
Yeah, I mean, this is again where I can fall into despair. I think we are having some real challenges in terms of like epistemology, right? You know, epistemology is how we know things, right? And so with the, I mean, I think, you know, if I could, you know, many people have thought through these things, but yeah, I think we need to, you know, regulate Facebook. I think we need to, I mean, I think we're living in these epistemic, you know, we're in an epistemic crisis, right? A crisis of knowledge. You know, we have a crisis of common knowledge. And so, and we have, you know, kind of ginned up myths and BS that are having real political effects. And you have, you know, people watching videos all day about how the people across the political aisle are, you know, tyrants and are, you know, hoping for everyone on our side, you know, to be decimated. You get what I'm saying? So I think these are major, major challenges of how we begin. You know, one of the phrases I've been using for the last 5-6 years is that fascism is first an assault on reality. Fascism is first an assault on reality. So, you know, we've seen a lot of, we're in these media environments and these media bubbles and this intense polarization, political polarization, where we can't even agree on reality. Much less. So how are we going to agree to come together to implement difficult policies and, you know, and forward-looking, you know, visions for the future that makes sense in terms of ecology and social justice if we can't even agree on basic reality? So these are major challenges, Dominic. I'm not gonna sugarcoat that one. You know, this is part of why I think we can, as much as all of us would love to be journaling about our visions of the Ecozoic era, I think we also have to be involved in standing up to fascism, politically defeating authoritarianism, working on strengthening democracy, and you know, and healing this epistemic crisis where people literally don't even live in the same reality right now. So these are all major challenges. Absolutely.
Thanks. And passing some bills in DC, get something done.
Yes, indeed.
I've always loved this quote that Art Mitchell has posted for us from Gus Speth. I used to think the top global environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. The top environmental problems actually are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with these, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
That speaks to your entire message.
Powerful. Yeah, I think we need more than just, I don't think that the news story or the universe story is the immediate answer to all our problems. I mean, there's a great quote that Thomas Berry told me once where he said, cosmology is not the immediate answer to all our problems, but it's a context for answers. And I thought that was well said. But, you know, but listening to the wisdom from Gus Speth, you know, it reminds me that I don't think it's as simple as we learn the universe story and everything's fine. You know, it's like, we're going to need to work on, you know, maybe we need Buddhism, maybe we need therapy, you know, maybe we need, you know, some deep healing and, you know, nonviolent communication skills, you know, and I think there's a whole range of things that we need to move forward into the future. And I think, you know, the cosmology, the worldview piece, the news story, the universe story is a huge aspect of it. But, you know, we have multiple challenges on many different levels.
So the cosmology is the basis of how we think. It strikes me that people can be extremely generous. They can be compassionate, a lot of compassion when their hearts are touched. I think there's a way to cut through it all if we could have situate, just as you say, the knowledge and the appreciation of what this means to people to have this crisis come down on us, and what it would be like for particularly their children to go through it. But that I think that heart is so ripe if it is touched, I don't know, the right way, and in some way, that I think that we could get up that head of steam to make a difference much more quickly. I still don't understand why we don't do it more when we know when people are doing things to us that are not good for us and not good for our families. I do believe the people at a certain point will demand some changes.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think humans, have a tendency to not be as forward thinking and as proactive as we could be, but we have immense capacities and resilience and creativity when our backs are against the wall. So I think we're approaching that kind of
4 inches to go.
situation pretty quickly here. So, like I said, it's like there's a quote from William Golding or somebody who said, the future is already here. It's just not very evenly distributed. And I think that is true in both a positive and a negative sense. Like there's immense technologies and possibilities that are already here for a few rich elites, but there's also, future suffering and future, crises, economic, social justice, climate, climate refugee situations that are here for certain communities, poor communities of color, communities in the global South, particularly indigenous communities, what we call frontline communities. So, in that negative sense, the future is already here. It's just not very well evenly distributed, but it's becoming more widely distributed, so our job is to transform that distribution of the negative climate future and crisis into more widely distributed, positive and healing and transformative futures.
Drew, one thing I've wondered about is the arts and whether they're doing their part. The civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, had really prominent, in fact, somebody once said that music in the 60s, internet of today. And I don't see that today. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I think you're right in the sense that, I know of almost nothing like what happened in the 60s in terms of the popular music becoming so subversive and such a clear vision of alternative political and social ideas. And it's like you can just, I'm fascinated with that whole period, particularly as someone, who studies the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King, but huge fan of music and particularly arts activism. And you just, whether you can just go year by year, and it's whether it's, Bob Dylan or Bob Marley or Curtis Mayfield and the Impressions, or, I was just talking 2 days ago to somebody about Aretha Franklin's Respect, and pointing out to them that it's, of course, and then that's a song, of course, that she took from Otis Redding, who had originally written the song Respect, and he would joke that she stole the song from him because she made it so much her own. But on the surface level, that song Respect is about a woman or a man, depending on whether Otis is or Aretha is singing it, wanting respect from their partner at the end of the day. But it's but in a very real sense, that song was about respect for African Americans and for women, this type of thing. And so like even a song like Respect that's operating on a kind of a romantic level is also a deep social message at the time over all the radio waves of respect. So anyway, so I could just go on for days talking about how the powerful arts activism of the 60s. And I love arts activists, whether it's, going back to the labor struggles, so, there's always music involved, going back to arts activists like Paul Robeson or, James Baldwin or Nina Simone, or, you know, like I say, Bob Dylan, Bob Marley, the Snick singers that became Sweet Honey in the Rock, you know, and you just don't see that. I mean, there's always a subversive quality to art and music, but you just don't see anything in the 70s and 80s, 90s, 2000s that about the similar to how that constellated in the 60s. It was really profound and powerful. I think you're right, Penny. I think that we could use more. I do think the arts are absolutely vital for stirring us, for stirring our imaginations, for they're always an integral part of a strong social movement. There's some kind of Irish revolutionary who has a great quote, you know, that says, you'll know a movement has really taken hold when it's, you know, when the people are writing their own songs, you know, about the movement, you know, this type of thing. So I think we need the arts the same way Swim and Barry were always saying that we need the artists to tell the universe story. And we need the artists in each one of us. You know, each one of us is an artist. One thing I love about Matt Fox's teachings and the way he always emphasized art as meditation is something for every person that's in my graduate school program. That, you know, and he would often quote this Japanese artist who said, it's not that the artist is a special type of person, but rather every person is a special type of artist. And so, and it's not just that the arts stir us and galvanize us and give us messages that we can communicate and move us into action. It's even deeper than that. It's the fact that the imaginative process, the creative process, the poetic impulse, the artistic genius that enables us to envision something that's never existed, that enables us to think of a transformed situation. It's the same thing. The same process: dream, story, vision, imagination, creativity, that poetic impulse that can imagine a new poem is the poetic impulse that can imagine a new world, is the artistic vision that can imagine a completely different, more just, more equitable society. So our capacities for creativity, imagination, poetry, and art are integral to the process of social change and vision and cultural transformation.
Wow. Well, we've come
That
up
was very
to our
important.
time. And you had agreed to read us out if you.
I'd be happy to. Here is a poem that I wrote in honor of Thomas Berry. So before I read it, let me just say thank you so much to Gail and to Penny and to Bob for your technical support, and to all of you for the chance to be with you today. And do stay in touch. You can always check me out on drewdellinger.org. And Marlene, the thumbs up. Great to see you. Great to be with you. Okay, here's a poem. It's called Carolina Prophet, poem for Thomas Berry. We were dreamed in the cores of the stars. Like the stars, we were meant to unfold. We were dreamed in the depths of the undulating ocean. Like the waves, we were meant to unfold. Like bursting supernovas, birthing elements, which crucibles give rise to creativity. The world makes us its instrument. Father Thomas, speaking for stars in a voice old as wind, origin moments are supremely important. What are the origins of a prophet? Found in syllables of Sanskrit or Chinese characters, in a decade of midnight prayer, in childhood epiphanies rising like heat, blue Carolina sky, dark pines, crickets, birds, sunlight on the lilies in the meadow across the creek. Born in Carolina on the eve of the Great War, Saturn conjoining Pluto in the sky, raised in a world of wires and wheels, watching dirt roads turn to pavement. Brooding intensity, measuring loss when others could see only progress. White hair communing with angels of earth. Father Thomas reminding us we are constantly bathed in shimmering memories of originating radiance. We are constantly bathed in shimmering memories of originating radiance. The psychic stars, the conscious soil, this thin film of atmosphere, and only gravity holding the sea from the stars. When a vision of the universe takes hold in your mind, your soul becomes vast as the cosmos. When the mind is silent, everything is sacred. Like the spiral, like the lotus, like the waves, like the trees, like the stars, we were meant to unfold.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Drew, so much.
Thank you all. It's really special to be with all of you.
And wonderful. There's been so much conversation on the chat. You've touched a lot of parts of us. And we continue to look forward to what you do and where you go and how you give voice to the universe.
Thank you, Penny. Much appreciated.
Oh,
All right.
glad to know you're still working. Thank you for sticking with it. Thank you for going deeper.
My pleasure. Thanks to all of you. It really is special to be involved in this work with all of you.
Great. As we wrap up today, just a heads up that in 2 months, on January 6th, Matt has agreed to join us to speak on Day of Epiphany and Day of Infamy. So that ought to be an interesting conversation. And next month, we hope to have someone come on and talk to us about Glasgow and what's moving there. So,
Okay.
blessed be.
Should be.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
It's true.
Shall I end it? Yeah, okay. Bye-bye.
All right.